Wearable technology is becoming way more popular these days. In fact, I have my Apple Watch right here, and this is one way that I personally measure my own physical activity and my own energy expenditure. And a lot of other people wear these devices for these purposes as well. And what's great is with these devices, we can more or less directly measure physical activity depending on the specific device. And like we've talked about in the other units, these direct measures or slightly indirect measures, they have benefits over self-reports, because remember, with self-reports, people lie, people don't remember, and self-reports tend to often overestimate energy expenditure and physical activity. So the two main types of systems we see within activity monitors, or types of activity monitors, are things called accelerometers and pedometers. Okay, so these are the two most common, and some devices have a combination of these, plus let's say a GPS system as well. So heart rate monitors, think like Fitbits, think my Apple Watch as well. They measure heart rate and they use that as a proxy to estimate energy expenditure. And it's not bad, okay? There is a linear relationship between our heart rate and our energy expenditure as well, so a VO2 max. However, these estimates are better at kind of moderate intensity activities. When we get into high intensity activities, they become not as good, and really low level intensities not as good either. Okay, so these activity monitors can still heart rate monitors can still over and underestimate physical activity, but they're a lot better than, let's say, self-reports. Okay, so there's different ways with our heart rate monitors measuring heart rate. Of course, ECG is one option. There's chest straps that use electrical pulses, and my Apple Watch is going to have something called an optical wrist-based sensor, okay, which measures our artery volume, and they extrapolate that data to measure our heart rate, because that artery volume is going to change depending on how much our heart is beating, or the frequency of the change in that volume is going to change depending on my particular heart rate. Okay, so heart rate and the measurement of heart rate depends on the type of activity, the characteristics of the individual. So how dehydrated or hydrated a person is can potentially affect artery volume, for one thing. How good that device is at actually measuring things, and whether it's placed properly. Okay, so for instance, if my Apple Watch is on loose, it's not going to be as good at measuring these things. Okay, and we keep saying that intensity level matters. So at low intensity activities, it's not as good at measuring heart rate. Okay, so one thing that we've used for a long time that are becoming less popular these days, but they're pretty popular even like 5 years ago, are pedometers. Okay, and some are these spring-levered pedometers. Okay, which basically every time a person takes a step, the lever arm moves up and down in response to the movement and a movement of our hips, and a step is recorded. Okay, there's also something called a piezoelectric pedometer, which uses this specific crystal, and with certain amounts of acceleration, that leads to a compression of that crystal, and that is associated with the amount of steps that a person is taking. Okay, so these are ways of estimating step count only with pedometers. Okay, accuracy varies by the model. It also varies on where it's placed. Like if someone places it on the back of their shirt, like it's not going to measure it as well. Typically on the hips and kind of at a good place that's going to catch the movements of the hips, this is going to be a better place for measuring that. Okay, but like I said, one of the main limitations is that it only really records steps. So if you want better information than that, it's not that great. Okay, however, they are inexpensive. So if you're doing a study with, let's say, a lot of people, and you just really need step count as a way of measuring physical activity, these are pretty decent for that purpose. Okay, but if you want better data, usually we use these accelerometers. And your phone, if you have a smartphone, if you have an Apple phone or an iPhone or a Samsung or a Google phone or all these other ones, they typically have these accelerometers built in. Okay, they measure acceleration in 3 planes. Okay, and that acceleration reflects the amount and the intensity of the activity. Okay. However, the accuracy of these accelerometers is not as good with other types of activities like cycling and skating and swimming. And I'm a swimmer myself, and I always get pretty frustrated with my watch because I'm like, I'm working way harder than this, and I feel that it's not really capturing it, but maybe that's just me as well. So these devices are going to take that data from the accelerometer and they're going to convert it, right? They're going to use algorithms to convert it into energy expenditure, or METs, to estimate energy expenditure for that person. GPS systems are often built into these smartwatches too, like my Apple Watch has one, your cell phone will have one as well typically. And what these do is they can also measure, how quickly, they can measure acceleration as well, because they can measure how quickly people move from one location to another, okay? It's often used to track distance, and like I said, they're used with the accelerometer to kind of pool that data and get a better reflection of how quickly and the intensity that person is being active at. Okay, so a combination of several of these types of measurement tools is typically going to give us more accurate data. Okay, so like I keep saying, a lot of these wearables are becoming very popular. Watches, a lot of people have these different types of watches, but our phones have a lot of these tracking devices too. There's also I've seen activity trackers built into sunglasses and all sorts of different things. So they're very popular these days. And actually, because they're so popular, BPK actually now has a new course specifically devoted to wearable technology. So great course to take if this is something you're interested in, because the research on these things keeps increasing. And they're seen not only as a way for us to record our data for ourselves, but also a great research tool, and also a great tool to communicate with your doctor or other health practitioners as far as your health status. There's even some insurance companies in the States that if you use certain activity trackers, wearable technologies, and you send that data to your doctor, and they use it to monitor your health, your insurance premiums go down. So these are becoming more and more popular and used in more and more ways. Okay, so common brands of these fitness trackers or activity trackers: Apple Watch, Fitbit was really big for a while, although I see it's kind of coming down a bit. A lot of people still have them though. Garmin, these are kind of the big names in wearable technology. Okay. Like we said, they often measure a combination of things, including energy expenditure, heart rate, steps taken, distance traveled, sleep now as well. The issue with some of these devices is their battery life is terrible. Like this one, I have to charge every day. So tracking sleep, I know the new Apple model does track sleep, but the battery has to last long enough to be able to do these things too. Okay, so a lot of Americans, and I don't know the Canadian rates, but these are really popular throughout the world and in North America, and a lot of us are wearing them. And most of us feel that it's okay to share this data with researchers, but data privacy is becoming a big concern and topic of debate these days. So we'll see how people feel about sharing their data into the future. But it's a really exciting area for researchers because, it's a way better measure than self-reported data. And if we can just get people to wear these things, we have computerized already digital data that we can take and work with to look at particular trends or whatever we're trying to look for in a research study. Okay, so basically this slide just shows the number of studies published on wearables over the last, let's say, 8 years. And historically, we were mostly looking at step count, but you'll see an increase in the amount of studies that are looking at wearables for heart rate and energy expenditure as well. Okay, those studies are becoming more and more popular. We're probably going to see it increase more and more too. As far as their accuracy and validity, it really depends on the device. One meta-analysis from 2020 showed that energy expenditure in general is underestimated, but it really depends on the device, and it depends how honestly, like how many different measurement tools it's combining and how good the algorithm is to put those together. And also on how accurately they're actually measuring the different things they're measuring, okay? There's generally high inter-device reliability, like for instance, Apple Watches in general, the different generations of Apple Watches, they have kind of similar results. Different generations of Garmin watches have similar results, but between Apple and Garmin, let's say, there's more differences we see, okay? This is a really good line here. Fast moving environment makes it hard for research to stay current. So the research keeps coming out more and more on these things, but it's hard. We don't really have a great overview of the current status of these wearables, but you're going to see more and more research on them into the future. Okay, so this is actually from a study from 2020, kind of came out of my birthday in 2020, September 8th, and it looks at the mean percentage error, MPE, for a number of different devices for heart rate, step count, and energy expenditure. And basically how you read this is the bigger the box, the more likely there is to be a lot of differences between the specific versions of the device that they looked at, and there seems to be a larger error usually, okay, the larger the box is. The closer that box is to this line suggests that there isn't a lot of error. So for instance, the Apple Watch for heart rate, the error is less than 5%, it's about 3%. Okay, so the Apple Watch, again, here on steps, it's pretty accurate as well, not a lot of mean percentage error. With energy expenditure, the box is bigger. Okay, so there's a little more error in actually calculating energy expenditure. Okay, and you can look through this to kind of get a sense of how the different devices go. This shows that Apple is one of the, of course I'm biased because I'm wearing one right now, but it shows that Apple is one of the most accurate ones and reliable ones as well. Okay, but it really depends on the device. Okay, so these, like I said, are an emerging area of research and use, and we're going to see more and more studies on this into the future, but they're one way to survey physical activity and other health factors within a population.